to each pass the microphone back and forth, and we'll kind of take some turns. So first, can you please tell us about yourself? How long have you been in the real estate industry, and how did you start in your investing career?
I've been in the real estate business 24 years. She mentioned economic development as well. So I'm a graduate from Fresno State with a degree in business. So I came into real estate by accident, right? I never thought that would be my future, but I went into economic development, and my sibling, he actually paid for me to take the courses. He's from the North Valley. And so friends, knowing that I was in the business, kept asking, can I buy a home from you? And it started to get a little bit busy, so that's why I got started. I became an investor in 1998, bought a triplex in the Tower District, and that's where my beginnings were.
Dave Kidder. I actually got my license the same week I turned 21. And I had my first closing the same week, and I think to this date in Clark County in Washington State, I may still be the youngest, quickest realtor to get a check in real estate. It's when you had a provisional license, and I was fortunate, hit it early, and my initial business was I went door knocking, I went farming, and I happened across a builder who was not happy with his current agent, and we went on to build we developed property, and he went on to build 75 homes, and I was able to work with him and bless and work with him up until he did pass away. It was unfortunate. He became a good friend. I was in real estate in Washington State until 1984. Interest rates at that time were in the high teens, and so got very creative. And then I broke from real estate, took a little bit of a vacation, and I re-entered real estate in 2012 here in California.
My name is Frank Patino. I started flipping houses in 2017, and it kind of started because early on in 2012, I was still going to college and I bought my first house. So that's probably what kicked it off, because in a couple of years, if any of you had been around in 2012 and were realtors, you know, I was in a realtor. I was pretty young back then, still in college. But it was a good move because there was a lot of equity that was built in the next 5-6 years. So I actually did a cash out refi, and I started taking, you know, the 40-50 grand that I cashed out, and I started using that for down payments, using hard money loans. And ever since then, I started flipping houses. So now, you know, I partner up with Oscar over there. We started a division, we bought a franchise. We also started a different LLC where we completely stick with flipping, a lot of assignments, a lot of innovations, a little bit of creative financing, nothing cool like David does over here. But we're trying to do a lot of volume. Still good? Okay. So again, that's kind of how I got started there.
You can pass it back down. Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you guys so much for introducing yourselves. Everybody in the crowd, just so you know, there are some little cards on the tables. So at the end, we are going to do kind of like a modified Q&A. So if you have a question that comes up throughout the process that you'd like to ask, please fill out that question on there, and we're going to have people coming by to grab those cards so we can make sure that we ask those questions at the end. Okay. Carmen, back to you if we can. How do you determine if a home is worth keeping as a long-term hold?
Well, actually, I made the commitment and the determination to just make long-term buy and holds. So that's how I determine that. The process I use is I do want a cash flow. I do like to buy homes that are easy to maintain when I move in, or not move in, when I purchase them. I like to put in granite kitchens, bathrooms, you know, make them nice for people to stay longer. And so that creates less of a, you know, move outs, and people like to stay longer too.
Thank you so very much. So I think our order's a little off, but it's okay. Dave, in today's market, what are some of the creative financing tools that you utilize for investing?
So I think it's very, very important that we start asking the question of our sellers, is your loan assumable? And if they're not sure, they need to contact their loan service company and get something from them. I'd say get it in writing. But a home that has an assumable 3.5% interest is actually worth more money than, because of that low rate, that we can get more money for the seller if they have an assumable loan. The other thing is, every time I look at a property, every time I see where cash is needed, I think seller financing, because everywhere that you would typically think we need cash for this, you can substitute seller financing for that cash. It takes some work and it takes some cooperation, but we need to understand seller financing at a really high level right now. And then there's other things, but I think always ask for the motivation of people. If their motivation is strong, and I'm not saying they will sell it for less, they may be willing to take different terms than what is traditional out there.
Thank you very much. Frank, how do you identify a possible flip? And then if so, what are some factors or variables that you're going to consider before you choose to take on a project?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy process. It's basically a numbers game. So a quick hack that I used to use, and I still do now, when somebody texts me, hey, I got this house for ARV's 300, I got it at 250, I almost walk away from it right away. Because a quick hack, you need at least $80,000 to $100,000 spread just to even look at that deal. So from the purchase price to the resale price, make sure you always got a massive spread just like that. And then I usually start from the top down. So if the house is worth, $300,000 to keep the numbers easy, and it's 1,000 square foot house, then I kind of know what my rehab is going to be just by looking at the pictures. In Fresno, you could kind of factor in another little quick cheat number for you guys. Factor in $30 a square foot for a rehab. That's pretty common. We're about 25, maybe sometimes even 22, because we really, we have a couple of contractors that we really set a good game plan with. But I would factor in $30 a square foot right away. And then if you're using hard money loans, throw in $10,000 in expenses just for hard money loans right away on that. And then you got to take off your profit. So you got to go from ARV, take off your rehab, take off your hard money fees, take off whatever profit you're going to target, you got to build that in. And then factor in always a cushion, 5 to 10K. Just drop it on there no matter what. And then from there, you're going to get a purchase price after you take all those numbers off. So it's all a number game. Start from the top down. Make sure your ARV is on point, because if your ARV is a little off, it throws everything else off.
Thank you very much. If we go back to Carmen, that'd be great. Carmen, how do you determine the appropriate rental rate for a property? So, and then on top of that, how often do you reassess that number?
I can determine the rental rate by doing a rent survey, and that's actually kind of simple. I like to talk to other investors or owners in neighborhoods that I have homes in. That's the best way to get accurate numbers when they have recent move-ins or move-outs. I also use Zillow. I like to use the FAR, the MLS, Fresno MLS, because you can have leased information in there with numbers and dates. I use apartments.com and Rentometer, and also the Fresno housing rental list. I like to go and look at the charts because they do update their rental pricing. And that is so important to know because I just recently, I like to put my money where my words are, right? If I go over and talk about, using the housing authority, I actually did that recently. And they like to negotiate with you on rents. So when you have those rent surveys and you can show them what the rents actually are in that neighborhood, it helps really keep your rents where you'd like them to be. And I keep an eye out. I don't have very many move-outs. I would say my tenants stay at least 5 years. Some have been there 10 years to 15 years. When you buy units, sometimes they come with tenants and they hardly move out. So in those instances, you try to keep an eye on the rent so that you can update them yearly. Because as a landlord, with these laws that have passed, rent caps and all of that, you kind of have to watch that and increase your rents every year if you want to keep up. Otherwise, you're behind.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So yearly checkup. Okay. Dave,
Yep.
what are some types of securities that you can use to finance a deal? So maybe buy land, do new construction. What are some things that maybe some people in this room haven't heard of as securities that you can use?
Well, I'm going to go from possibly the most secure for everybody is I can use my own home. I can, say, buy a piece of property with a seller financing, and instead of using that land as the security, I could use my own home as the security for that land, which gives me the opportunity to go out and, say, get a construction loan on it. I can go in my lender and say, I own the property free and clear. I can start the building process with less money out of my pocket. That's probably the most secure for everybody in it, except my wife. She would kill me if I told her I did that. But other than that, pretty secure. The second way is if I have something of value, and it is a pink slip to my Porsche. I don't have a Porsche yet. A pink slip to my Porsche, and I use that as collateral for my contract on the piece of property. Now again, that's less secure, but yet, depending on the motivation, I have a gentleman, I have his property listed, he would jump all over that hill in a second. Somebody who's more conservative, or maybe they can't afford to have any problems, may not be open to that. There's also other kinds of securities, and I'm going to throw something out, and if you go out and put a deal together using this idea and you don't clear it with an attorney and your broker and all kinds of people, then it's on you. But there's a thing called a zero coupon bond. And the zero coupon bond can be of any face value. And I've used those in the past as the security to purchase property. Now, would I do it again today? No, I wouldn't do it today. I feel it was very risky for the seller. They were comfortable with it and they were desperate to sell the property. Used it, it turned out well, but at the end of the day, that's not the most secure for the seller. And again, it has to be a win-win for everybody to do it. If you have other stocks and bonds, again, can you collateralize those and use those as the security against something? Again, your stockbroker, your accountant, your attorney need to answer that question, but there are other ways to secure property other than just the property that I'm buying.
Awesome, thank you. Frank, for you next. What are some financing methods, if there's a few, I'm sure, that you use to buy your flips?
Basically, I think there's three. One is going to be cash, which is the one that I recommend the least to use. Even if you have 200, 300 grand, you're better off leveraging that over 2 or 3 properties versus dumping it all into one. Hard money, probably the easiest one to get into. There's a bunch of hard money lenders that are out there. We use a couple that we really like lately because they only require 10% down. So I haven't found anyone, at least in the last 6 months, that are requiring less than 10% down. Most hard money lenders, after the rates started going up in Q3 last year, started increasing their down payment to 20-25%. But we've done 4 or 5 deals in the last 2 months with one where they're doing 10% down. So hard money is an option, and then private money. So we also use private money. We borrow money from either another investor, a friend, a family member, somebody that has an excess of cash and they don't want to leave 200 grand in the bank and make $1 a month. You basically insure their money by getting a first position on the house. If you guys have done anything like that, usually your title company could create a note and get all that stuff done for you. But I would say cash, hard money, and then the best one is going to be a private lender.
Thank you so much. If we could pass it back down to Carmen, that'd be great. Thank you. Carmen, what is the average rental demand in Fresno? And on top of that, what are strategies that you use to keep your turnover rates low and maintain stable occupancy?
The turnover in Fresno, I think it's between 2 and 3%, which is very low. In a lot of areas, it can be up to 5%. But we have to remember, Fresno County is still very low rent-wise. I know we don't feel that way, but it really is compared to LA, San Jose, and San Diego, and a lot of the other more expensive areas. The way I keep turnover low is by, again, making sure that I provide good housing for my tenants. Everything is in good, maintained well, and people like living there. So I think that creates opportunities. I'm going to tell a story, a real short one. I once did a lease auction with a tenant. They had a foreclosure and had to wait 3 years to buy. They leased auction, took it, and bought my rental in 3 years. I exchanged that. A year later, they called me because they moved up to a home and they turned that home into a rental for a family member. So those are the kinds of things as an investor that we like to see. And those are the things that I appreciate, aside from, making the neighborhoods beautiful. And that causes a real big chain reaction when you do those things, and people appreciate it as well.
Thank you. Dave, how do you use assumable loans to invest?
Okay, if you take nothing else away today, take this. Who here lists home on a regular basis? No. Who here has taken listings in the past? Show of hands. Okay, this will up your game in front of the client if you will remember to do this. You ask them, is your loan assumable? And what is the interest rate? If it's less than what we are today, then that makes that house, if nothing less, a little bit more sellable. Maybe, in my opinion, when I've used it in the past, again, I had this career before, it raised the value of every home I worked with by having an assumable loan. And at the time, if I could get a loan that was assumable at 12%, that was golden, because the current rate was 16 and 17%. So if I could market the home X amount down, assume this loan at this 12% loan, my phone went off the hooks. People would line up to buy that home, and they would usually pay more than what they would pay for if they had to go get a 17% interest loan. So when you're taking a listing, find out, is it assumable? And then I would market that. Again, talk to your broker on how you do this, because there's also, you run a field of possible lending issues if you're quoting rates or something. But I think agents need to know that loan is assumable and what the payments are and what the interest rates are. If you could do that, you will, again, in a listing presentation, it'll make you, nobody else is doing that. Unless you find out you're competing with me, then you cannot use that, okay? But use that in your listing presentation, find out if it is assumable. When I'm buying a property, instead of coming in and paying cash, and if I find out that it is an assumable loan, and it's at 3%, I can't borrow money. Your hard money guy is 10%? I can borrow money at 3% from the seller and assume his loan. I'm ahead of the game right there. Now I don't have to come in with as much cash to buy it. The other thing is, don't be afraid of, if it's an assumable loan, also asking the seller, how would you like to make 7% on your equity? And then I introduce a seller financing for either the total down payment to get to the assumption, or I use it as a partial down payment. So instead of coming in with 30% down, maybe I come in with 20% down, 10% as seller financing, and assume the loan. You now have an advantage when you have to hold that investment for a while at a lower cost to you. So that's how I would use assumable on both sides, on purchasing, but also in marketing your listing.
Awesome, thank you. Frank, all right, so you kind of talked about this a little bit, but in more detail for the renovation costs, what's your budgeting process when you're looking at renovation costs? And then if there's an unexpected expense, how do you handle that?
So, like I said, a quick cheap number that you guys can remember is $30 a square foot. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that does not include any big ticket items, which would be like a roof or an HVAC. But a quick cosmetic, and I'm talking paint, flooring, changing the doors, changing the hardware, repainting the kitchen, adding granite, like she mentioned, to every single flip. Just everything you can see and touch. If we have to, renovate that, we're averaging 25 to $30. We're closer to 25. So one thing you always want to look at is there any huge red flags. Like if you walk into a house and you drop a marble and it goes sideways, that's a big red flag. Like you want to make sure you get an experienced guy to go look at it, to make sure that there's nothing wrong with it. If you see that you walk into a house and you see a lot of two-prong outlets on the wall, they're probably not grounded, it's an older house, you probably want to factor in $6 to $7 grand to cut half of that drywall on the entire bottom half of the house and rewire everything and then retexture everything. So those are the things that you want to watch out for, those big items. Make sure that the AC is running. If it's your first time, it may be worth for you to partner up with somebody or take somebody with experience, ask them for some help. Maybe do some pre-inspections, I've done it before where I pay for a pest inspection. If I see a lot of rot damage on the wood, if I don't know how much I'm gonna have to account for, I'll pay $100 and send a pest inspector, and they'll go out there, they'll come back and they'll say, dude, it's gonna cost you, we're gonna have to actually cover this whole thing, it's gonna be $5,000. So then I factor that into my number. So if you didn't do that, you would, for $100, you're better off knowing that right up front, so you can factor all that in. So it's just, it takes a lot of experience to kind of be able to point out some of those things. I don't know exactly what the second part of your question was.
So the last part, you basically covered it, but the last thing is, like, if you've had an unexpected expense, how do you handle that?
You handle that right up front by building a cushion. So we just sold a house last week in Madera where everything looked great on the house. We staged it, it sold $10,000 over asking. A buyer even did an appraisal gap of like $7,000 to strengthen their offer. And it was great because it actually appraised at $435, so we're able to get the $440. But then we ended up having to change that condenser on it, and that was $3,300. So we had a cushion on there of about $6,000 on that house, so I was still okay. So you prep for the bad stuff by getting ahead of the game and having a cushion always.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. So we're gonna finish out before we go to the Q&A session. If we could pass it back to Carmen, that'd be great. I'm gonna ask you guys all kind of the same question. What's a major challenge, or what major challenges have you seen in your respected investing niche, and then how did you resolve them?
Unexpected has been, difficulty finding properties to buy for investments, and the numbers are really tight. How did I kind of planned for this in 2021, end of 2021, when rates were 3.3% for investment property. I refinanced several properties. But then again, when you do that, that's great, right? So I went to 20-year loans, payments of $700 when the rents are $1,300 to $2,100. So that's good, right? But then you have difficulty finding the properties. So that's like a catch-22, right? So that's how I plan. Just plan ahead. If you have opportunities like that to refinance, take them and use your properties to leverage yourself. Did I answer all the questions?
Somewhat. I'd like to ask you a little bit more, though. Is there any particular problem over your entire time that you can think of, like a particular issue that came up, and then how you resolved it?
I bought foreclosure homes without seeing the inside, because some we have to purchase, you can't disturb the tenants, that kind of thing. And again, I have to look at the numbers. These are cash buys. So I figure my number, I figure I'm gonna keep long term, what's my rent gonna be? And it turned out okay. I figure I may need an AC system. I didn't know what the interior was like. There's no pictures, you can't go in. And on that particular home, I did great. It had tile throughout the house. I did put in a new AC system, but I still have the property and it's doing wonderful. So just plan your budget and know what you can expect. Know your numbers.
Thank you. Okay. Dave, same question. Yeah, what are some major challenges you've seen, and how did you resolve them?
Who in here knows Roofie with Guarantee? Yeah. During the end times, I'm taking him with me because he's a survivor, and he does not let things die. He is very creative. We had a deal, my buyer, his seller, it was on a little duplex on McKinley. It had already fallen out of transaction twice. The seller's done. 3 days before we're supposed to close, the lender says, oh, we've changed some things, we can't do that loan now. This is 3 days before it's supposed to close, so I don't know if Roofie was calling me or I was calling him. I think we both got a busy signal, and then one of us got through the other one, and the question was, will your buyer do a seller financing? Will your seller do a seller financing? We closed it 5 days later using seller financing. The buyer he had $100,000 down. He did, it was a 3-year contract with it was 30-year amortized, 3-year balloon payment, and he came in with $100,000. So the seller felt very secure. He ended up, a year later, cashing it out. But we closed that, like I say, in 5 days because both agents and both the buyer and the seller were willing to take care of the problem and resolve the issue. That's probably my biggest recent home run. And again, I always will praise Roofie for his willingness to create options for the buyer and the seller.
Same question. I would say the main challenges in my world when it comes to obviously finding houses right now, it's a challenge for everyone. But the main challenge in my world, once you get a house, under contract and we start flipping it, it's dealing with the contractors. So I don't know if any of you guys have dealt with contractors before, just coming in to repaint a bathroom for you guys or coming in to do granite work or something, but you know, some of them could be challenging. So, you know, I've kind of dialed in some systems where, you know, you gotta be really, really firm with the contractors. You gotta say, hey, what's the budget? What's the timeline? I control all the materials, by the way. I always get a labor bid from them only, and I control all the purchasing of the materials because I want to know what finishes, what quality we use. But I usually get them onto what if it's going to be a 3-week project. I have them divide how much it's going to get done every week, and I divide their labor bid. If it's 15 grand, you get 5 grand a week. Only if you complete those 10 things that you were supposed to complete that week. If you're 80% there, you get cut. You know, and then on the last week after we do our final walkthrough, I always hold back 20 or 30% of their draw, just because I want to do a final walkthrough, and I'll just, you know, walk around and mark everything that needs to get done, and then at that point, you know, I'll say, here's the rest of your money. So, you know, my challenge with the contractors, so you really got to set a game plan when you go there that you can't let those guys slack off. If you ever flip your first house, go there at 7 a.m., 7:30, make sure the guy's there. Go at 3 p.m., make sure he's there. You want him to work regular work hours. You don't want a guy that's going to be coming in at 4 o'clock, work for 2 hours and go home, or coming in the morning and then go to another project after lunch.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So we're going to kind of open it up to some of the questions that I have here on the card. If we could, I'll start with Carmen. So the question reads, do you rent a lot or do you rent at all to Section 8? And then what are the pros and cons?
Yes, like I said, I do investors exchangers, so I invite you to go and look at the archived meetings. There's a lot on this. I have started with Section 8. I've tried in the past. This last opportunity, when I put in my ad, I had 80%, we call it housing voucher now, calls. And so I went ahead and accepted the housing voucher program. I did have Brittany who came on to investors, and we had discussions on the processes. So there's a VIP program that I was able to get into, which is supposed to take 2 weeks. I'm on week 3, and my inspection is going to be this Wednesday, right? So I have to keep them on their toes and let them know time is money, and I'm on week 3 when I should have, you know, rented this out previously. The other thing to keep in mind is I have to turn in my rent surveys to the department because they try to negotiate with you. So if you know what the rents are in your neighborhoods, it's much easier to get the rent you're looking for. You have to, you know, justify and show. And it worked out because they really do try to negotiate.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So, Dave, this isn't specific for you, but I feel like you could answer this. How does your prediction or predictions of the market changing over time affect your process of investing?
Well, this is the question I ask every home buyer is, how long do you plan on staying in this home? And if this is my forever home, then does it really matter what you pay? Because in 20, 30 years, it's free and clear. Meanwhile, if you hadn't bought this home, you'd be paying rent, and that rent would be going up. So it doesn't really matter. If this is your forever home and you plan on raising your family and building dreams here, the price you pay for it is going to seem inconsequential your first Christmas around the Christmas tree or whatever family event. So I think in investing the same way, if it makes sense today, I believe it's going to make sense in the future. I don't believe rent will come down dramatically. It hasn't since they've been tracking it. And I've seen records back to 91. Rents have done nothing but go up, even during the collapse. There was some maybe tough times, but overall the averages have gone up. So if it makes sense today, it'll make sense in 20 years. And it'll be free and clear.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to swap mics here.
Can I drop that one?
So Frank, literally, this one does have your name on it. So Frank, what DZC, I don't know what that means, marketing strategy have you found to work the best for you in the Central Valley market, and why?
All of them work. You just got to do them. So we do a little bit of everything. We have, I don't know, 4 or 5 full-time cold callers that are out of the area, and then Brittany, who is here, she kind of takes all those inbound leads. We do thousands of letters every month in direct mail. We do thousands of text messages every week in text messaging. We're getting real heavy on PPC and online. We're getting a handful of leads from online, but it's I would say most of our stuff is coming right now lately. The last contracts that we've gotten come from Driving for Dollars and from our cold calling team. And direct mail has always performed well.
I just got asked, and I should have asked this earlier, what does DZC mean?
I don't know. I'm thinking that means driving for dollars, D4D.
Okay, or DZC.
Or DCSR loans? Are they talking about?
Oh, it said DZC. Who asked that question? D2C.
I don't know.
Direct to consumer.
Yeah. So all of the marketing things that we do, we're going directly to homeowners. Yeah. We're going directly to homeowners. We also started. We also brought on Michelle, another team member, and we're also elaborating into agent outreach as well. So that has also brought in some connections. You know, we're always looking to connect and do business with agents, and we always want to make win-win solutions for everyone.
Thank you. Carmen, we got another one for you. How do you hold the title on each of your investment properties?
Well, I've started because it's been so many years individual, and I started 5 years ago as LLC. So I think for liability purposes, that's much better because your name is not on the properties, correct? So I invite you to investors. At the end of the month, we'll have an attorney on trust, so that's going to be key. I do want to mention something. On my triplex that I bought in 1998, that tenant had been there 10 years, and guess what? They're still there today. So, you know, we did give them first option to buy. We sold like several properties between 2004 and 2006 because the market was so high, and made about $900,000. That's $900,000 that you make because you've lived in property. So I suggest, I see so many young faces here and so much opportunity, right? Don't think of your first place as your forever home. Think of it as an investor, and you know, maybe buy units and keep moving. You can move every year or every 2 years, right? So I like that part of the real estate business.
Thank you very much. So Dave, have you ever financed a home using the subject to method? And then if so, or if not, what are your thoughts or opinions on it?
So it's my understanding subject to is that there is a loan in place. I buy the property using a seller financing or seller carry, and I'm making payments to them and they're making payments to their original loan, is my understanding of a subject to. I've done a lot of those. I've had investors do that. There are a lot of pitfalls that can come in here. And I'm going to say on seller financing, my recommendation is to consult a qualified, certified California real estate attorney, and also make sure that your escrow company is well grounded in seller financing. And I've yet to talk to a escrow company who's not. But I'm making payments to the seller and they're making payments to their bank. So I need to protect my buyer. What happens if that seller decides not to pay taxes, not to pay the mortgage? Then I need to have it structured in the contract where the buyer gets notified if those payments aren't being made, if the taxes aren't being made. Because the lender will call the loan or foreclose on you if you're not making insurance, taxes, those payments, or your regular payments. They'll foreclose. So how much of a nightmare would that be? I'm buying a house, I'm making my payments, and the person I'm buying it from forgets to make payments and he gets foreclosed on. He doesn't have any resources to pay off that loan. Now my house, which I am buying, gets foreclosed on. I am now forced to come in and pay off that underlying loan. So there's a lot of issues you need to be careful on the subject too. Here's the other one, and a lot of flippers, I'm not picking on you. I've had a lot of investors who want to say, would you be willing to as subject to? And if I say yes, but I haven't talked to my lender or my service processor, my loan servicer, I haven't talked to them and said, what happens if I sell my house on a contract? And there's a little clause in there, and it's just a few short words. It's called a due on sale clause. So I don't ask that question, or somebody says, oh, don't worry about it, they'll never catch that. Or don't worry about it, that never gets exercised. Well, if I'm an investor and I have a loan out at 3% interest and I find out you just sold your house and I want my money back so I can loan it out at 7%, guess what? I'm gonna trigger that due on sale clause. And now you've created all kinds of problems for you, for your buyer, for your seller, for your broker. You're gonna make some attorneys fairly wealthy though. So be very careful. If you do this, don't go into this thinking you know everything, because I don't. Run it by your broker, again, an attorney, and have a heart-to-heart with your escrow people.
Thank you. All right, Frank, so what areas do you limit to do a flip, or how far will you go to complete a flip?
We do anything in the Central Valley, Stockton down to Bakersfield. We've done a couple in Bakersfield this year as well, so we don't limit it, but I would say probably within 2 hours of where you're at. You do want to be at that project at least once a week. If it's your first one, I would say you guys are there 2 or 3 times a week minimum if it's your first project. And if it's a new contractor also. So you want to make sure you build a good relationship with the contractor, that you can trust them to work there 5 days a week with you having to show up. But we go north 2 hours, we go south 2 hours. Full flip.
And then one more question for you that should be pretty easy, I think, but have you ever encountered any problems with the city in terms of code violations, and how have you gotten over those?
Yeah, you just have to pay them.
It was easy. Okay, perfect.
You have to pay them. Yeah. Sometimes you can negotiate them down a little bit. Sometimes you can, but a lot of that stuff you catch on the title as well. So our title company has done great, and they usually find a lot of the stuff that prevents us from having headaches later on.
Thank you. Back to Carmen, if we could. Would you ever inherit a seller's problem tenant?
Of course. And I have many times. And sometimes, they just want a little bit of communication, so you can work it that way. And if they're really a problem, then you can have a good attorney take care of it. So if the property is worth it, I don't see what the problem is. You just have to manage your time. You're going to spend probably 2 to 3 months if you need to get rid of a tenant. I don't want that to sound that mean, but that's about the length of time it may take. But the tenants I've inherited, they've all been pretty good. Some maybe a little problematic at the beginning, but again, when they know that there's a new owner and that you're going to take care of the properties, I think that's key. I think maybe they were forgotten, and when someone comes in and really they know you're there for them and for their benefits, they cooperate.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Dave? So I kind of want to ask you guys all this question, and then I maybe have one more question for you on top of this, Frank, but what are some questions you think that we should be asking if we want to get into real estate investing? What are some things that might come to mind that we maybe forgot to ask?
Wow. So my favorite question to somebody I'm mentoring or coaching or working with is, I know you don't know the answer, but if you did know the answer, what would it be? And I feel like you just asked me that question. You have to ask lots and lots of questions. And if there's been a time I've asked questions when we were looking for houses, and my wife goes, "Why are you asking that?" I don't know sometimes. But to me, it seemed important. It seemed right at the time. And there are no bad questions that you can ask. So I'd say, if you leave here and you've got a lot of questions, write them down and start talking with your co-agents, your co-lenders, your other people. And I think I'm getting away from your question, I'm sorry, but I would say, I think the most revered person in the room is the one who asks the best questions. And so always be asking questions of your client and finding out motivation. Is it assumable? What happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? And know ahead of time what they will stand before you even come to them. I was asked this week to negotiate on a couple of transactions, and the buyer's not telling me, the agent's not telling me what their buyer will do, and I don't feel comfortable going to the seller and just say, well, what will you do? It never turns out. But looking at everything, I had some very strong suggestions. Here's what I think will happen. And at the end of the day, the buyer and the seller agreed to exactly what I had recommended, because I was able to ask enough questions to the seller to know what kind of pain they would go through and what they would not do. So asking incredibly good questions. And if you don't have enough questions to ask, get together with somebody who's maybe gone through some things before and ask them the same question. What questions should I be asking? If I have not spent a very large amount of time with my lenders, there are things I wouldn't know about the industry. So I think I asked fairly decent questions of the lenders I'm interviewing to work with, and I hope that they ask the same thing. So ask good questions. I think that was your question too, wasn't it?
Yeah, kind of. It works out. So for Frank and Carmen, I'd like to ask you the same thing. In your respective world, what are some questions that maybe weren't asked today that you feel like should be asked for someone who's new in that world?
Now, you're talking about the flipping line of work, or you're talking about like talking to clients when we're out trying to...
I'd say anything, honestly. Yeah, what are some good questions to ask?
I would say I'll kind of split it two ways. So one, if you're doing a lot of like you talking to clients, if you're either trying to get a listing or you're trying to buy the house directly from them, you got to ask questions that are very deep. Like what we try to do is we try to ask very deep questions. We try to get to the bottom of the problem. What's the reason? What's the motivation? What's the timeline? What's the price? Oscar does a great job training our team on that. I mean, he really, really elaborates that. We've had it where we have clients that are literally, crying in front of us because we're able to help them out. We've had some testimonials where we're out there, we're renting U-Hauls for people, and they are giving us a testimonial, and they're basically crying because we just bailed them out of foreclosure. They had a house listed, it didn't move because it needed work, so many different things. But when you're out there asking questions and you really want to lock in, I would say in the 20 minutes, you got to be like a 20-year friend for that customer. Somehow, some way, figure out what questions, figure out what you need to do. And when it comes to my line of work, asking questions, or if you want to get into investing, I would say the first question has to be to yourself. Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go and be a real estate investor? Like, what does that mean? Do you want to go and flip houses? Do you want to go buy condos? Do you want to buy rentals? What price points do you want to buy, or where can you get started? So ask yourself those questions first, because from there, I think you can pick and choose the path of where you want to go. And then after that, you go and hound a couple of other people that are doing what you want to do, and you ask them questions.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then Carmen, I'd like to ask you the same question. What are some questions that you feel like people should be asking, in your line of work?
I would say the same that Frank just mentioned. I would ask the buyer, seller, tenant, what's their motivation? What is their need, right? Because a lot of times maybe people don't ask those things, and I think that's important. And that's it for me, but I'm gonna share a couple things since we're here about investing in long term. Some things that investments can do for you, long-term investments, is create retirement for us, right? Diversify our portfolios if you have other investments or if you sell real estate. Tax shelters, right? Generational wealth, pass it down to your heirs. And the most important, it gives us financial freedom. That's key for me. I think at home 7 or 8, that became true for me. So that's so important. And then pay for college, right, for your kids, or your old age, your senior years. Don't want to call it old age, sorry about everybody over 50. I'm 50 now, so I think I'm okay. But yeah, your senior years. Thank you.
Well, guys, thank you so much. Can we please get a round of applause?
Can I throw in one thing? And it's, as far as the questions that we, to ask, is go find your favorite escrow officer, or find your least favorite escrow officer, because this may give them a lot of stuff. But find an escrow officer, or the person that shows up and is, meets you every week, and ask them, can you find me a list of assumable loans, homeowners that have assumable loans? Ask them that question, and then that's maybe an area that you could farm into.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. I'm going to pass the mic off to Johnny. Thank you guys all again for coming. Thank you, speakers.
Thank you, guys. Amazing panelists, guys. You guys did great. I hope that you guys got a lot of good nuggets from the panelists and the questions that were asked. I know my membership chair wants to leave you guys with a little message, so stage is yours.
My question to you guys, first of all, can we give it up one more time, please, loud, so they can hear it and feel appreciated, because you guys just got some nuggets from some of the top people in our industry, so please show them love. Who here is here for the first time? Can you raise your hands if you're here for the first time? Can we all give it up for those people here for the first time, please? reason I want to acknowledge those of you guys here for the first time is because I want to congratulate you for investing in yourself. These events that YPN, that this committee puts on, we put them on with a lot of thoughtfulness. We really want to make sure that we're bringing value to the table, that if you guys are spending an hour or two here with us, that you're walking away with value. So we want to make sure, we work really hard to make sure we bring the top folks, and these guys did amazing sharing some nuggets. I hope you guys were taking notes. I just want to share with you guys really quick, please, whenever you come to any event, anywhere in this industry, especially those of you guys that are new to the industry, make sure that you're getting value. You don't leave the event until you get a nugget or two that you can apply in your business to help you be successful. Because if you're just showing up to the events to shake hands and take pictures, that's not going to be enough in this market to help you grow, make money, and do what you need to do in your business. So make sure you don't leave here that you pull over somebody that, that's doing great in the business and ask them what they're doing, and if, how you can be helped by something, a nugget that they can give you. So make sure you don't walk out of here without a nugget, because your success is ultimately going to be up to you guys. We can only bring you to the water. We can't make you drink, all right?
Mic drop. Okay, so we are done with the event. We want to give you guys a little treat. So we're going to have some good music. We're going to have some networking time. And I want to thank each and every one of you guys for continuing to support Fresno YPN, on our mission to raise the bar and provide value for you guys. Thank you guys. This is a beautiful crowd. We hope that you guys enjoyed the event. Till next time.